If I could get council to come on screen, please. To the clerk, are we good to go?
Not quite yet, Your Worship. It's always a bit of a delay.
Understood.
We're good now, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this, the 54th session of council on this Monday, September the 27th. Council has been meeting in closed session for starting at 6 o'clock this evening. And with that, I call the meeting to order for 7:01. I note that all members of council are present other than Councillor Buderick, who has been attempting to connect through, but is having some technical challenges, and will continue to try to connect. With that, I remind everyone that this is a virtual meeting, and as such, under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, our council's rules of procedure, code of conduct, and other pertinent legislation apply to these meetings as if they were an in-person meeting. If any members of council's connection is to the meeting is interrupted, I will ask council to pause for a few moments until the member can reconnect. And if the member has not reconnected within a few minutes, assuming we still have a quorum, the meeting will resume in their absence. This time, for the purpose of the minutes of the meeting, I will ask for a roll call of the members present, starting with the deputy.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Parks.
Present.
Thank you. Porter.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Townend.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor Gordon.
Present.
Again, I've noted that Councillor Buderick is attempting to connect, and I will make note when he arrives, if he arrives. That, as I mentioned, we have been in closed session, and reporting out of closed session, we approved the session minutes of the closed session September 13th meeting, and we received information with regard to the Amherst Island Ferry Agreement. And there's nothing further to report. And for open forum, is there anyone in the audience who wishes to present for open forum this evening? I will ask that if you are able to use the raise hand signal in Zoom to indicate to the clerk that you're here and available to speak. And I will call to see if there are any attendees wishing to speak tonight. To the clerk, do you note anyone?
Your Worship, we did have Mike Wallout and Jeff Forrester that were wishing to speak to council in regards to correspondence that was sent. I see Mr. Forrester in the attendees, but I do not see Mr. Wallout. But I will bring Jeff over, and then he may be able to speak.
Thank you. Mr. Forrester, please come over. Welcome, Mr. Forrester. Can you hear us? You appear to still be muted. We can't hear you at this point.
I'm sorry about that.
Not a problem. Welcome, Mr. Forrester. Please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you. We just, Mike and I are here to represent the Amherst Island Recreation Committee, a subcommittee of Loyalist Township. We had put a letter through to council requesting some assistance. Currently on Amherst Island, the community center is attached to Amherst Island Public School. It is the gym on the public school. So the agreement that is 20 years old, outdated, between the school board and the Township of Amherst Island Recreation Committee is dated, and we'd like to get a renewal done with this, and we're looking for some assistance on that, maybe some staff assistance. And I just wanted to be here to say the importance of this community center to the Amherst Island community. Currently, there's no forum for any kind of recreation. Before the COVID lockdown, we were doing Zoom. We were having volleyball nights, pickleball, these kind of things. And so currently we have nowhere to go with that. Also for things like dances, social functions, that kind of thing that has happened in that facility since 1977. So we would like to, we're trying to get a new agreement made with the school board, and I think basically we're asking for some help from staff on that, but we would very much like to be a part of a new agreement.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Forrester. Just my own comment to it, I can tell you I've had discussions with our senior staff, and they have been in discussions with the school board, and that is continuing. Of course, as we all recognize, unfortunately with COVID, much of the access to the school property has been shut down because of the COVID protocols, but I believe the intention is to continue and move back to an agreement. Does any member of council have a question for Mr. Forrester at this time? I'm seeing none. Do you have any final comments, Mr. Forrester?
No, I don't think so. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to present to council this evening? The clerk, are we aware?
I'm not seeing any, Your Worship.
Okay. If there's nothing further, we'll move forward. At this time, I will ask for any declarations of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. And I'll go to Councillor Porter.
Yeah, I'm going to declare conflict of interest on 4.1 and 4.2 as being owner of properties affected by both of those.
Thank you. Are there any other declarations of pecuniary interest? I'll go to the deputy.
Yes, it's just for the record that in closed session, I declared a conflict of interest on the Amherst Island Ferry agreement, as I'm employed by the party that's entering negotiations with the township.
Thank you. Are there any other declarations at this time? I'm seeing no further declarations. The clerk will have noted those declarations and we'll move forward. Thank you. Now we move into public meetings. First, 4.1, the 2021 draft development charges bylaw in public meeting. I believe we have our consultant and staff here to provide a presentation, and then we shall hear comments from the public or agencies. And with that, I believe Ms. McNevin, you're leading this.
Yes, Your Worship. Thank you. Just a brief introduction. This evening we have Mr. Andrew Mirabella from Hempson Consulting with us to provide council with a brief refresher on the draft development charges study and outline some proposed changes to the corresponding draft bylaw. So Debbie, if we're able to, we can allow Andrew to share his screen. Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Mirabella.
Good evening, everyone. Pleasure to be back with Andrew Mirabella, as Brianne mentioned, a senior consultant at Hempson. We were retained to undertake the township's development charge background study in an effort to pass a new DC bylaw. The purpose of today's meeting is a statutory public hearing being held under the Development Charges Act, and specifically Section 12 of the Development Charges Act. Really, we're here today to provide the public with an opportunity to make a presentation on the proposed study and bylaw. Both the DC background study and bylaw were made publicly available and to this meeting in accordance with the Development Charges Act. So I have probably about 15 slides here. I'll try to move through them relatively quickly. I was in front of council maybe about 2 months ago, month and a half ago, to discuss the draft results. And much of the information that we saw that day has made its way into the background. And obviously a kind of very similar type presentation that I have here today as it was a few months ago, but it is a bit of a refresher, so I will go through it. So just in terms of development charge itself, what exactly are we talking about for those who don't know? They are fees imposed on development to fund development-related capital costs. The idea being here is as the municipality grows, new infrastructure and facilities are required to maintain service levels. So any road expansions, new road constructions, new facilities are all required, and those can be funded through development charges. DCs cannot be used to fund kind of more your asset management type activities, replacements. It is required or needed to fund expansion related activities. And that's kind of the key in terms of what's being eligible for growth. And the principle behind DCs is that growth pays for growth, so that the financial burden of funding or kind of in placing infrastructure to support new development isn't borne by your existing tax ratepayers. It is borne by those who are benefiting from the infrastructure being put in place. So one of the key steps of the DCs, obviously, is one of us should undertake a development forecast. What we hear is just a summary of what's outlined in the background study in much more fulsome detail. We have 3 lines here: our census population, households, and place of work employment, tracked over from 2006 all the way to 2030. 2006, 2020 being kind of the historical period, and then 2021 forward is kind of our development forecast period. In terms of population, we are seeing, at least in the terms of the projections here, kind of linear type growth, obviously kind of continuing on the trend, what we've seen here over the last number of years, kind of keeping with historic patterns, moving to about 19,000 people, excluding kind of penitentiary population by 2030. And household growth kind of continuing on an upward path and remaining strong and consistent over the planning period to 2030. Similar type trend in employment, despite kind of the loss of employment during the economic recession back in the late 90s. We are kind of seeing the employment levels regain and continuing to increase, similar, kind of keeping with an activity rate with your population, your household growth over that planning period. So certainly a kind of good news story on the development forecast side. Certainly a lot of activity in terms of your development permits, and that trend is kind of continuing here in our DC background study itself. Once we have our forecast in terms of population, households, and employment, we look at what infrastructure is required in order to service the development. The capital programs itself have been compiled in consultation with township staff based on your budgeting, based on ongoing studies, master plans. The capital cost itself, when they look in terms of the development charge study, not all the costs and the projects are all deemed to be entirely related to development. And there's a series of deductions which need to be applied on a case-by-case basis to recognize that the shares of the project which need to be netted off the total cost. So any shares of the program that have a capital grants or subsidies or some sort of other recovery are accounted for in the calculation. Any replacement or bet to existing shares, so shares of the project which need to be funded from non-DC sources because they're not entirely deemed to be development related, are excluded from the calculation. And any available DC reserve funds hand, which development has already previously collected for, are incorporated into the calculation. And any shares of the project which benefit development outside the planning period which you've identified is considered for recovery in a subsequent DC study or subsequent growth related studies. The 10% statutory discount, which used to be employed in your previous DC study, has actually been eliminated as a result of changes to legislation, which came into force just last year. So that is a good news story for the municipality, as you were able to recover additional costs through development charges, which you might have not been otherwise able to in previous years as a result of that mandatory. So what we have here is a 10-year capital program for services related to emergency services, parks and recreation, roads, public works, development-related studies, and stormwater management. The 10-year program summary results to about $44 million. Of that $4 million, there's a couple of important things that I want to point out of that. About $28.2 million is directly attributable to your parks and recreation area. And the next largest service area is going to be both roads and public works, comprising of almost another $10 million. Parks and Recreation was driving that as the community hub, both the roads related to various improvements to your road network, expansions of your sidewalks, and also on the public works side, expansions to your kind of building fleet there. But what I mentioned with of the total gross program cost of $44 million, what's interesting is that that $44 million, your DC collections, which we've identified as DC eligible in period, which actually gets rolled into the calculations, is about $10.4 million. So only a fraction or a share of that total $44 million is actually deemed to be discharge eligible and fundable through this program and through the rate that we're going to be calculating on the foregoing slides. And you'll also see a fairly big portion of the program has got a green box, which means that there's kind of grant, subsidy, or other development-related recovery that's incorporated in it. And a big portion of a lot of that $16.9 million is being driven by Community Hub and attributable to the new Parks and Recreation Center itself. So just a couple points there in terms of how the costs are allocated, but certainly the Parks and Recreation component is a big portion in terms of the total gross project cost, but also in terms of what's actually DC collectible, DC eligible under this planning period at $3.2 million of that total $10.4 million. So now we have a bit of an understanding of the overview of the total quantum of the capital program. The calculated township-wide residential development charge rates are calculated on a per unit basis, differentiated by dwelling unit type. Single and semi-detached dwelling unit has a rate of $8,957. Your multiple is $69.53, and apartments $54.32. The pie graph on the left looks at the distribution of those rates by service area, service category. And just thinking back on the previous slides into which of the categories itself are driving the capital program, we saw public works, parks and recreation, roads and related driving the total quantum of the gross cost as well as the DC eligible share. And that then translates into the actual collection of the rates. So of that $8,957 for a single detached dwelling unit, 37% of that total rate is going or attributable to parks and recreation. 20% is attributable to public works, and 16% is roads and related. And the remaining categories get the balance of the rate. And just as a note, these are the township-wide charges, and obviously they exclude any of the water and wastewater impost fees, which are levied under a different authority being the municipal act. So how do those rates compare to the DC rates that are currently in force? The current charges are about $5,746. The calculated rates that we have here are just around $8,950, which gives us a difference of about $3,200 from the rates that are currently in place, representing a 56% increase from total. The difference line items looked at obviously on a line-by-line basis for the service areas where we're seeing some of the changes. Most notably here, we are seeing a change in your parks and recreation category, as well as public works category of service, as it relates to making up a portion of that $3,200. Both of which are being driven by the community hub and the public works additional storage buildings and maintenance yard within that. So certainly two identified projects which are driving some of the increases that we're seeing in this capital program and it's themselves. So how do those rates compare to some other communities? Just a couple of caveats here. This is looking at single family detached residential units on a per unit basis. We've compared it to other communities in kind of the Eastern Ontario region, recognizing we've also included some communities up in Simcoe County and to the northern end of York region being East Gwillimbury. The rates that we've had here, we've tried to net out the water and wastewater DCs or inputs, so we are comparing apples to apples between the different communities. That being said, recognizing that a developer that would pay any new building type for construction of a new single detached dwelling unit would also pay the water and wastewater component. Similarly, they would pay a water and wastewater component in other communities as well. But we kind of want to isolate the rates to what we're actually calculating under this particular study. So your current rate is $5,750 approximately. You're going to about $8,960 approximately. Moving into kind of the lower end of the spectrum to about the middle of the pack in terms of some of the other neighboring communities. You'd be just less than Belleville and South Frontenac and Brighton and Kingston, but higher than Greater Napanee or Prince Edward County. Obviously to the extreme end, both is Brockville at $2,200 per unit, and East Gwillimbury in York region at the top end of the spectrum. Most of those charges in the region in East Gwillimbury relate to the region of York's charge as well, but nonetheless, it is there for comparison purposes. The only other item that I'd like to mention on this particular slide is, when we think about the charges, we calculate the rates relative to the infrastructure needs and servicing requirements of each individual community. Although it's important and councils are obviously particularly interested in how the calculated rates compare to other communities, but it should be considered in the context of what infrastructure you need to service the development that's planned in Loyalist Township, and everyone has different needs and servicing requirements and different growth pressures and levels of growth, which all kind of play into the calculation of the rates themselves. So that's just a point of reference, a point of note, which is also important from a non-residential perspective, which we'll see in the next slide. So on the non-residential side, the calculated rates are township-wide as well. The rates here are differentiated between your industrial and your non-industrial development charges. They're calculated on $1 per square meter basis. The total charge for industrial is $38.44, and the non-industrial charge is $56.09. The rates are differentiated only by the basis of your roads and related charge, which is based on kind of the road demands each of those different industries would place on the infrastructure needs, and that's the kind of the differentiating component between the two industrial and non-industrial rates, both of which are seeing a similar type of increase to the quantum of the charge, about $17.22 for your industrial rate and $25.11 for your non-industrial rate, representing approximately just over a cent increase on the total current rate that's in place right now. So non-residentially, for the non-industrial charge, which would kind of attract your commercial and population-related development types, the current charge is $30.98 per square meter. The calculated rate is $56.09 per square meter, which would kind of bring you to more towards the middle end of the spectrum relative to other communities, less than Kingston and less than South Frontenac, but it would still be higher than those in Bedville or Prince Edward County or Port Hope or Greater Napanee. And again, just for clarification, these rates exclude any water and water import fees, which would be collected in addition to the township-wide rates under the Development Charges Act. On the industrial side, you're currently kind of towards the lower end of the spectrum relative to other communities on the industrial rates. And the rate itself, after calculating it, would be about $38.44, which would bring you towards the middle, towards top end of the spectrum here relative to other communities. But still obviously very competitive. There's a series of towns that are kind of within $1 of each other or $2 in terms of your industrial rates before it really jumps up itself trying to knack around $70 per square meter. So those are the kind of the calculated components to it and the mathematical elements of the BAM study in summary. The bylaw itself has also been put forward for consideration, and a couple items just to update council in terms of what's changed or what's been in there. The draft bylaw at this particular time has the development charge rates coming into effect at the fully calculated on January 1st of 2022. The current list of exemptions in the bylaw has not been adjusted. So therefore, there's no change or policy changes to what development would pay or not pay development charges. It would be kind of status quo from what was currently being done. The bylaw has been updated to reflect recent legislative changes. So just some housekeeping in terms of the Development Charge Act changes as it relates to the freezing of the rates or secondary dwelling units. We made adjustments to the bylaw to reflect that. So it's in step legislation. Then the last item here is we've included a provision to ensure that the DC bylaw is indexed and in accordance with the legislation. That's always been done in Loyalist Township. So not to say you have not been adjusting your fees. It just the language in the bylaw has been modified to ensure that it can happen automatically, kind of just as per the legislation allows for it, rather than kind of having the option not to do it. It'd be as of right by way of the bylaw. So obviously there's some implementation options and policy considerations that council makes some decisions on, not necessarily today, but certainly in the near future before we pass the bylaw. Council has the authority to implement the maximum allowable rate that we calculated here, or is he lower than the maximum allowable rate that's calculated. There's a couple important considerations though, as the finance person I am, that I will caution around the second on there being a DC rate that's lower than the maximum allowable. Any lost revenue associated with any discounts, exemptions, or reductions in the rates or phase-ins would have to be made up by other sources, being property taxes. We cannot increase development charges to pay for any non-statutory type exemptions or phase-ins. And therefore, DC cannot be increased for any service category to make up for other service areas. So, for example, we can discount non-residential development charges and increase your residential development charges to pay for the shortfall of revenue associated with providing the one exemption. So they have to be uniform, and any revenue loss is a tax-supported revenue loss. And the last point is, just because the new legislative requirements under section 26.1 and 26.2 of the Development Charges Act, there's a built mechanism within the framework to phase in effectively or hold or freeze the rates for certain developments. So if someone were to come in with a site plan application that's deemed complete or a zoning bylaw application, their rates would be frozen at the time of application, irrelative to what happens to the rates during the intervening period to which a permit is until the council approves the application and 2 years after that time period. So there is a mechanism built in under legislation for freezing of the rates and providing a bit of a deferral on certain types of developments as well in terms of payment periods for institutional, nonprofit, and rental housing. So just something to keep in mind from a perspective as we make these decisions going forward. So just as an overview in terms of our consultation process to date and some of the next steps, we were in front of council kind of in the summertime, earlier in the summer. Then subsequent to that, we had a developer consultation in August 18th, 2021. And obviously we're here today for the statutory public meeting held under the Act, in which formal notice of the meeting was provided in a newspaper and kind of communicated with the industry as well. We're here obviously to answer any questions from council and respond to any public questions which they had. We'll be doing that over the course of the next several weeks with the intention of passing a new bylaw on October 25th of 2021, which would be kind of 60 days after we the background study public, which is in accordance and in step with the legislation as well. So that is our target, and at the end, also the end of my presentation, so I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Mirabella. I'll turn to council. Do we have any questions for Mr. Mirabella on his report at this time before I go to the public? I'm seeing no questions from council at this time. I'll repeat, this is a public meeting. The audience is invited to make comment on the draft development charges bylaw. And I'll turn to first of all, I will ask Mr. Mirabella if he can stop sharing for a moment so that we can see each other properly in Zoom.
Sorry about that. There we go.
Not a problem. And again, I go to the public to see if there is anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to this presentation. If you have the ability to use the hand up signal in Zoom to indicate your desire to speak, would you please use it? And I know the clerk is monitoring to attempt to see if anyone wishes to speak. I also note that there are a couple of people here by telephone. I don't know if they can. To the clerk.
Councillor Budek is on and he is unmuted, so he can speak when he so wishes. And I'm not sure the other one, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Budek, and welcome. We are in the public meeting right now, so I'm turning to the audience to see if there is anyone who wishes to speak to the development charges proposed. Seeing none, I'll ask a third and final time. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to the development charges as proposed? And there doesn't appear to be anyone who's wanting to present this evening. Again, I turn back to council. Any comments from council at this time? Seeing none, Ms. McNevin, do you have anything final to add to the report?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick update on that report. Township staff have not received any formal written submissions as of today. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, as noted in the presentation from Mr. Mirabella, the intent is for those comments to come in, and this development charges bylaw would be before council again, I believe the end of October. Okay. With that, then I will ask council to address a motion based on the recommendation to receive this report. Anyone wish to make that motion? Deputy Mayor, so moved?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Townend, thank you. Any comments from council? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand or yell out.
Aye.
Thank you. And motion is carried to receive that. Thank you very much, Mr. Mirabella, for your report. And Ms. McNevin, of course. And we shall move forward to item 4.2, which is the official plan comprehensive review amendment public meeting. And I believe we have a presentation from our senior staff. Our director Merritt is here to speak to it.
Through you, Your Worship, no, I will not be speaking to it. I will let the planner speak on my behalf, on our behalf. So I'm just waiting for Madam Clerk to bring Mr. Winicki and Ms. Furness on screen, and they have a presentation prepared for this evening.
Thank you. I see Mr. Winicki and Ms. Furness. Welcome. Yeah. And I will turn it to you. Do you wish to do the shared screen thing?
Yes, Your Worship, through you to the rest of council. Just give me one moment to try and bring this up. Okay.
I can see that. Go ahead, please.
Thank you and good evening. This is a rather important moment for the township. Our 5-year comprehensive review of the official plan has now passed 5 years, and we are approaching the finish line. But I think it generated what we think is the largest staff report ever produced that anyone remembers, with all the attachments that you received last week. The slide presentation goes into highlights from that report. And I will turn it over at some point over to my colleague, Andrea Furness, and there may be a brief interruption while I switch control of the slides over to her. But yeah, as I said, this is a rather important moment. Many people have been waiting for these policies for quite some time. Approving the official plan update will allow us to then move on and update our zoning policies, as well as adopt new community improvement policies, brownfield policies, and a whole bunch of other things that are sort of on standby waiting for this moment. So the purpose of today's meeting, A, is to hold a public meeting to provide an opportunity for the public to provide comments on the final proposed official plan update, to outline the modifications made to the official plan and provide a summary of how agencies and public feedback were incorporated into this review. And then finally, to recommend council adoption of the final proposed official plan comprehensive review amendment. Just by way of background, many of you already know this, but the official plan is required to be reviewed every 5 years or every 10 years once a new official plan comes into effect. We originally received authorization from council to undertake the review of the official plan back in August of 2016. And the official plan actually went through 3 draft versions in this review, and that were all circulated to our standard agencies and the public for comment. Just a quick summary of the meetings we've held so far. So there was a special public meeting of council in December of 2016, where we discussed what revisions we would be undertaking to the plan. There were a series of open houses later that year in June, where the public were provided an opportunity to review some of the draft policies and ask questions. And then we had a statutory public meeting that was held in December of last year, where we presented a final proposed amendment, again, offering the public opportunity to comment. Just a brief summary of the proposed amendments. So the amendments are based on 2 provincial policy statements that have come into force over the last 5 years. So one was the provincial policy statement of 2014, and then there was another provincial policy statement released in 2020. So the new official plan that you are seeing in front of you is consistent with both of those. The County of Lennox and Addington official plan also came into force, so our plan has been modified to conform with theirs. We've had other relevant legislation and policies, including MDS guidelines, Cataract Resource Protection Plan. Those have all been incorporated into this update. Comments from county agencies, provincial ministry, Indigenous communities, as well as council. The public consultation I've already mentioned was also included in this update. All comments were received and reviewed and considered by staff, and attached to that massive report that you received, there's also a table that sort of outlines all the comments that were received and staff review of each of those, as well as a final recommendation of whether to include those as modifications or not. And if not, then we provided reasons why we thought they shouldn't be considered. Basically, we only included amendments that were found to be consistent with the provincial policy statement, conformed to the county's official plan, and represented good land use planning. Just quickly about the provincial policy statement and the types of changes that were made to the plan to bring us into conformity with that document. There's climate change policies now in the draft official plan. There's policies supporting more rural-based businesses. We support asset management planning, addressing hazardous forest types for wildfire, a bunch of policies that deal with healthy communities, things like accessibility, planning for all ages, more policies to promote affordable housing, more policies to promote active transportation, supporting community hub development, as well as additional policies dealing with engagement with Indigenous communities. Now I am going to stop my share and turn it over to Andrea, who will take us through the next set of slides. Just bear us for a moment while we switch from my laptop to hers.
Welcome, Ms. Furness.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Is everybody able to see that? Did that?
Everyone can see it? I'm seeing nods. Go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on to the proposed amendments. Bowden just discussed the provincial policy statement amendments. Then the next round, there was a number of amendments made to conform to the County of Lennox and Addington's official plan. One of the largest ones being the population and growth forecast being projected out to 2036. We had looked into potentially extending the horizon further. However, the county did confirm that we need to conform with their 2036 number and be consistent with the same planning horizon that they have. But I should note that the county's official plan also states that the targets do not impact the ability for local municipalities to entertain development applications that are currently within the urban boundary, and that those targets do not limit that. So that being said, we have added a policy just to acknowledge the work being done on the Amherst View West secondary plan area, and to specifically note that this 2036 planning horizon does not impact the ability of the Amherst View West secondary plan area to use a 2046 planning horizon. We've established intensification targets right out of the county's official plan. So that consists of a 10% intensification target for Odessa, and then as well as, or for Amherst View, sorry, and 20% for Odessa and Bath. We have policies allowing for the infill and minor rounding out of development on private services and rural settlement areas, so being the township's hamlet areas. We have new policies and a new schedule to address select bedrock resource areas. So the county's mapping for bedrock resources, which is essentially your aggregate reserve areas, came from the Ministry of Northern Development and Mines. And it essentially captures almost the entire township as being a bedrock reserve area. So the proposed policies include exemption criteria for studies when people are submitting applications for severances, in order to acknowledge, basically not to require unnecessary studies for properties that may be in a rural cluster. So groupings of four or more dwellings in an area, it wouldn't be feasible to establish aggregate a quarry in those types of areas. So there is exemption criteria that's been built in for severances in those areas, and an associated schedule that specifically identifies those areas as well. We've expanded our review criteria when assessing mineral aggregate operations. So this is essentially when we get new applications for to expand a mineral aggregate operation or an application for a new one. And so the criteria now is consistent with the county and what they expect for their applications, essentially in looking at suitable haul routes and the types of studies that we can ask for. We also have updated water quantity and quality policies. These are policies that speak to water conservation, best practices in stormwater management, climate change, and protecting our drinking sources. And we do have special policies and new mapping on karst topography. So this being topography that consists of unstable bedrock. So we have policies that can require a study to assess this karst if it's concerned that any proposed developments in an area with unstable bedrock. Moving on to other relevant policies and legislation that was considered, secondary units. Currently, right now, the official plan only permits secondary units within the urban area, and they're only permitted in single detached dwellings. So we've now expanded this to permit secondary units across the township as a whole, and to also permit them in semi-detached units and townhouses as well. There's a number of policies associated with them, such as ensuring they're not located in natural hazard lands, and that parking's available, and servicing available as well. We've also included policies which are required under the Planning Act to permit detached accessory structures that could permit a secondary unit. So this could be a secondary unit above a garage or in its own accessory structure. Right now, the official plan is only proposing to permit these in the rural agricultural and hamlet areas. And so that's being proposed at this point with minimum lot area requirements and as well as confirming that the private services are available to accommodate them. We also currently have separation distances required in the official plan between group homes. These policies have been removed in order to comply with the Human Rights Code. And we also have new policies and an updated schedule to address source water protection. And that's intended to address the Cataraqui Source Protection Plan and consists of policies and schedules that identify the township's intake protection zones, groundwater vulnerability, recharge areas, as well as highly vulnerable aquifer areas as well. Additional policy and schedule changes consist of currently right now the natural hazards and natural heritage policies are all included in one, which is fairly confusing, and the natural hazards and the natural heritage areas are all mixed together in our current environmental protection area designation. So we have separated those out so it's very clear and have created a new natural hazard schedule. So it's clear what policies apply to what. We have cleaned up the environmental protection area and environmental sensitive overlay policies as well to clarify what policies apply to each and what levels of protection are applied to each as well. Our estate residential land use policies are proposed to be removed in order to focus development to the urban settlement areas where the appropriate infrastructure is available to accommodate subdivisions. We've increased the density thresholds for low and medium residential designations. So this is the amount of units per net hectare that are permitted in each designation, and those have slightly increased to allow more units. We have added policies to permit hobby farms in the rural area. This is something we hear quite often as planners on a regular basis from many members of the public to provide that opportunity and to just have a couple horses and so and not to have to require 25 acres as it's not a full-blown operating farm. So we have put in policies to allow that to happen. We've added dark sky policies to protect the night sky and address light trespass. We've expanded our community improvement plan policies. So our community improvement plan policies previously only permitted community improvement project plans to be prepared in certain areas of the township. They now can be prepared anywhere in the township if they meet certain criteria. One of the new criteria added also speaks to brownfields, to recognize brownfields as a significant community improvement criteria. We have new policies to permit cideries and small scale breweries along with our winery policies. We've added new recreation policies to address the Parks and Recreation Master Plan that was completed a few years ago. We have a new schedule for the significant groundwater recharge areas and vulnerable aquifer overlays, which connects with the Cataraqui Source Protection Plan. And then lastly, we've also made a number of housekeeping amendments just to improve clarity throughout the plan and some structural changes as well to make the plan easier to read. Indigenous consultation. We held several working sessions with the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte over the last several months. And I should also note that as we never received comments from the Métis during this official plan review process, we did hold some working sessions as well with Candice Lloyd from Newcomb Learning. And so after having several meetings with both of them, we developed some new policies to build constructive relationships by facilitating traditional Indigenous knowledge sharing and land use processes, policies to recognize that Indigenous communities are limited in their resources and their capacity, and to ensure that they're brought into the planning process at the earliest stages to allow them the sufficient time to provide us with some fulsome comments. And to also acknowledge the traditional process for Indigenous communities that must be followed when remains are encountered. And we also, at the request, incorporated new definitions that include definitions for Métis, First Nations, Indigenous, and Inuit as well. Both the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte and Candice Lloyd were happy with the final policies and thought that the improved Indigenous policies did make for a stronger official plan. Agency consultation. We did have consultation throughout the process with provincial ministries, but I should note that the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing did advise and direct their counterpart ministries that they should not be providing any formal comments on our official plan unless a specific request was asked by the County of Lennox and Addington to do so. So as the County of Lennox and Addington did not make that request, we have not received any formal comments from the ministries in the past year. However, we did rely on them in their expertise and in a more informal level, particularly the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, to review our winery policies and some of our agricultural related policies, which they reviewed and provided comments on. We did do several rounds of consultation with the County of Lennox and Addington as well to ensure that all the policies that we drafted were in conformance with their official plan. Both conservation authorities in our jurisdiction, Quinte Conservation only had very minor comments, which we did accommodate, and Cataraqui Conservation Authority was one of our largest agencies that we consulted with through all the drafts throughout the process, and they made a number of comments to assist us in improving our natural heritage and natural hazard policies. We consulted with utility companies, Enbridge, Northern Trans-Northern Pipelines, and addressed their comments. Canadian National Railway as well submitted comments indicating that they're satisfied with the plan. The pipelines as well. And in regards to the pipelines, I should note that we did address the majority of their comments with the exception of a few that were very prescriptive and more spoke to their easement requirements, which we didn't feel were appropriate in the official plan. And same with the KFLNA and public health. They had a number of comments in regards to policies on healthy communities and including active transportation. And we did accommodate all those policies, but we did not incorporate some policies that they were requesting that were related to specific rules in our public spaces, which we didn't feel the official plan was the appropriate document for those rules to sit in. So the final proposed official plan amendment, we provided notice on September 27th to agencies, ministries, and the county. The notice was also provided to all the interested parties that have participated throughout the process or requested to be notified. The notice was also posted on the township's website, newspapers, and on social media. So on this most recent proposed official plan amendment, we did receive 3 agency comments. One from the Cataraqui Region Conservation Authority, which I will discuss in a minute. The Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte advised that they had no further comments and appreciated that the township took their vision into account when preparing the policies. And we did receive comments from Enbridge Gas requesting us to show the pipelines within the schedules and to include policies related to pipelines. We did already have that incorporated into the plan, so I did resend those specific sections and the schedules to them, and they have since advised that, have reviewed them and advised that they're satisfied and have no further comments. And we have also received 4 public comments as well on this most recent version that I'll also speak to in a minute. There are a few minor new amendments stemming from the Cataraqui Region Conservation Authority, which we have included into the plan. This included just some just to clarify some features that are included in the environmental sensitive areas, just to ensure consistency with some other sections. There was another section that in regards to the environmental sensitive areas that doesn't change the intent of the policy in any way, but uses wording directly from the provincial policy statement. They just requested a title amendment in one of the schedules. And again, similar to the clarity between features and the policies, this was requested in the schedules as well. There was one policy related to additions and reconstructions that they were unclear on, and we can confirm that it was an error that it was shown in the last draft. It was previously removed and should have been shown as a strike through, but somehow the strike through disappeared. So we have made that change now, and they requested one other minor wording change. And they were satisfied once we made all these final changes and signed off on the official plan. And I did want to note, from staff's opinion, these changes are very minor that don't impact the intent of the plan. And so we did not feel that they warranted a recirculation of the entire plan for these few minor items. In terms of the recent public comments on the final amendments, we did receive a comment from a public member requesting a minimum 300-meter setback for a wind turbine from the limit of any highway and from the boundary of any non-participating landowner. The township currently was proposing a setback policy from wind turbines from the roads that was taken directly from Ontario's renewable energy approval regulations. However, we did agree that we didn't need to be so prescriptive in the OP, as the Ontario regulations identify a number of other prescriptive measures, and we were of the opinion that we could remove the setback altogether, as it would be addressed in the Ontario renewable energy regulations. We didn't want to commit to a 300-meter setback, as we're also requesting safety studies be submitted if applications are received for wind energy approvals. And in that case, safety study, which staff would also have to have peer reviewed, would also look at setbacks, which may end up resulting in a 300-meter setback or maybe more than that. We also received another comment that was asking for just sentence restructuring in one of the consent policy sections. Staff have no concerns with this minor amendment, and the official plan also, we have incorporated into the bylaw that we presented before you tonight that very minor technical changes can be made to the official plan without going through an amendment process. So typos and grammar corrections and things such as that. So we have no concerns with this, just fixing the structure in that sentence, and have advised the landowner we were supportive of that. We received another comment in ensuring that hiking trails that are shown in the official plan cannot be used unless a landowner gives their permission, and also request for additional protection to the Asselstein ANSI. And in regards to that, I have spoken to that particular public member and did show them some of the revised policies we had that did speak to getting landowners permission, as well as including wording within the hiking trail schedule itself, saying that it's only conceptual. The trails in a further public process would have to be done to actually develop them. In regards to the ANSI and further protections, it is protected in an environmental protection area in the official plan. So additional protections in terms of ATVs on it and other pieces like that wouldn't be addressed in the official plan. But the comment was noted and can be discussed in another forum. And so I did advise the public member of that, and they were satisfied after speaking to them. The last comment we received was a request that council pass a resolution in regards to allow Caitlin Corporation to submit plan amendments over the next 2 years. And this stems from, there's a Planning Act requirement that speaks to when a new official plan comes into place, there's essentially a moratorium for 2 years on official plan amendments being submitted by applicants. And the reason for that is when you do an entire new official plan, the intent is that you're not immediately changing that policy right after council approves a new official plan. However, we have been able to confirm that because this is an official plan amendment, we're not repealing our official plan and adopting a new one. That Planning Act clause doesn't apply, and therefore a resolution wouldn't be needed, and we would be able to entertain official plan amendments once this is adopted by council. So the adoption process, we are recommending that council adopt the official plan after hearing from public comments and under the assumption that we would be able to respond to those comments and nothing surprising comes forward. Following council adoption of the plan, a notice of adoption would have to be issued by the township. The County of Lansing is the approval authority, so we would be submitting the official plan amendment, the bylaw, and all supporting documentation, public comments, agency comments, etc., to the county. It is the county that issues the official decision, and the county has the ability to approve it as council did, or they're allowed to approve and make modifications to it. to parts of it, or as many parts of it as they feel necessary. The county will issue that decision, and the 20-day appeal period kicks in after the county's decision. And one other piece just to bring up, following council's adoption of it, we have received some questions regarding planning applications that are currently in process and were submitted under the official plan that we're using right now. So there is a general accepted legal principle, and we've confirmed as well with our solicitor that it does apply, that applications that were received under the previous policies, they are reviewed under those policies. And so it would be new applications that come in after the plan is officially approved that would be subject to the new policies. And that's all I have. If there's any questions, or thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Furness and Mr. Winnicky. And I'll turn to council. Do we have any questions regarding the presentation of the draft official plan? I'm seeing nothing from council. Again, this is a public meeting, so council will hear in person or by his or her solicitor. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Is there any comments from the audience with regard to the draft official plan as presented? And I ask that if you are able to use the raise hand feature in Zoom to make your comments. And the clerk will be watching for anyone that wishes to speak to this at this time.
Not seeing any at this time, Your Worship.
And wait a moment. Is there anyone wishing to speak to the official plan amendment as presented? The draft official plan amendment as presented. And again, for clarity to either Ms. Furness or Mr. Winnicky, if individuals present here tonight or not present here tonight wish to make comment on this official plan, they're still being received by staff.
Through your worship, we can always receive comments, but once council does adopt the official plan, then it is off to the county for approval. So unless they had already made comments during the process, the county also always has the ability to modify the plan. So if there's something that came up as a concern after the fact, we could always bring it to the county and get their consideration into including something through their approval process.
Okay, thank you. And it's kind of stalling for time to see if there's anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to this at this time. Still seeing none. To the clerk, are we still seeing none?
Still seeing none, Your Worship.
Thank you. Oh, I do see a hand up now. And the clerk, are you able to bring that individual over? Welcome. I see the name Yu Kang. And are you able to hear us, and are you able to make your presentation? You'll have to unmute.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. Can you tell us your name, sir, and
Yes,
address?
this is Yukon Lee. I currently live in Ottawa, but I'm a landowner on Amherst Island. I have a question about the secondary unit, which is currently only allowed on rural and primary agricultural land. I'm wondering if a secondary unit will be allowed to be constructed on a residential lot.
And I'll ask one of our staff to address that. Ms. Furness, Mr. Winnicky. Okay, Ms. Furness,
Sure.
you came in first. I'll go to you.
Sure. Yeah, through your worship. Yes, so secondary units within that are included within the dwelling itself will be permitted on residential lots. So the restriction in regards to the rural and agricultural areas, that only applies to detached accessory structures and a second unit being permitted in a detached accessory structure. But if it's within the dwelling, that's going to be permitted across the township in all areas that permit residential uses.
Thank you.
Understood. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Yu Kang. Is there, Ken, any other members of the audience who wish to address this public meeting? Final call. I'm seeing none. The clerk is seeing none as well.
Seeing none, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll move forward to the recommendations. Council, we have 4 recommendations before us. I'll ask you to address. Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
I move to receive and adopt the recommendations 1 through 4.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that?
Aye.
I'll take Councillor Buderick as seconder. Mover, any comment?
Just glad to see it come to this stage and be able to be approved and go to the county. And a lot of work's gone into it and a lot of public input. And it was really great to see that the amount of public input and the changes that were able to be made as a result of that. So just glad to see it moving ahead.
Thank you. Seconder, did you have comment?
Not currently.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have comment with regard to the motion at hand? I'm seeing none. Then I will call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand or yell out.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion is carried. Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our public meetings. We move to the confirmation of the agenda for the remainder of the meeting this evening. Okay. We have the agenda before us. To staff, are there any changes required?
That I'm aware of, Your Worship.
Thank you. Council, are there any changes required from council? And then I'll ask for a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Councillor Parks, second by Councillor Gordon. Thank you. Any comments? And then I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, I've already done the declaration. So we go to number 7, the minutes, the confirmation of the minutes of the 53rd session of council, September the 13th. All right, we have the minutes before us. Are there any noted errors or omissions within those minutes? Seeing none. All right, I'll ask for a motion to approve those minutes. Deputy, thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Townend, thank you. All right. Any comment? I will call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand or yell out.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion is carried. There are no delegations or presentations. We move to item 11, business services from the treasurer. Item 11.1, the COVID vaccination protocol. We have a report before us and we have Mr. Dickey here. Mr. Dickey, do you have anything to highlight or add to this report at this time?
Good evening. Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just to reiterate, this policy is being brought forward at this time, as we are assuming that this protocol will outlive the current declared emergency declaration. So just to bring it to council's attention, and I'll take any questions or comments.
Thank you, council. And I see that there's our CAO has come on screen as well. Did you, Mr. Silver, did you wish to make comment at this time?
Oh, Your Worship, I'm fine. It just, if there are any questions, I'm here to also help Mr. Dickey answer those.
Thank you. And I'll turn to council. Council, do we have any questions with regard to this report and the protocol before us? I'll go to Councillor Porter.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Under the report risk implications, did we have any opportunity, or did we, the author of the report, look to any legal counsel for an evaluation of risks or liabilities associated with a policy, or risks or liabilities associated with not putting a policy into place? I know that under the Emergency Act, our liabilities was limited, but outside of the Emergency Act, I'm just wondering, you know, if we had sought any legal advice or legal opinion on what risks and liabilities were there.
I'll turn to Mr. Dickey.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we did not hire a lawyer to look at this policy. We did look at a number of other publications. We looked at advice from the health unit in terms of developing the details. So we've used some of the language from the health unit's proposed wording, and as well as a number of other organizations, of course, are doing this at the same time, as it's quite public. So yeah, so we've looked at kind of what other folks are doing. We've read kind of the positions that are being taken, but we did not hire a lawyer as well to look at this.
I'll go to Mr. CAO as well.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, these policies are also new, and many municipalities are still in the emergency declaration stage. So we didn't ask for legal advice. I would expect that legal advice would be, you have the authority to do this, but anyone has the right to challenge anything. So this is all brand new, and we will be keeping our eye on court challenges. I know there was one last week about accommodating non-vaccinated people within the workplace, and there was a judgment that you don't need to do that at this point. So we will be certainly watching that. That's a very good question.
Thank you. Councilor Porter, anything further? No? Anyone else have any questions with regard to this report? Councilor Porter, go ahead.
I will change my mind. There's an option here under operational considerations where you say council could decide not to proceed with the COVID-19 vaccination protocol and focus on continuing to have team members, et cetera, et cetera. It's listed almost like that's an option. And I feel like the report is not totally complete in that I would like to see protect municipality as a whole and protect our taxpayers, look at what liabilities there could be for not putting a protocol into place, and look at what liabilities there could be, and financial liabilities for putting one in place. I know that we are fairly well protected under the emergency order, and but this is going outside of emergency order, and as such, I think we have time to get some sort of risk assessment of both scenarios. And so I'm not looking for, a legal opinion on the validity of the protocol. I'm looking for a risk assessment more so, like what are the risks associated with not putting one in place? What are the risks associated, and financial liability and financial risk to the municipality of putting one in place. And I think that just makes us do our due diligence and have all the information to make a fully informed decision.
Are you making a motion, Councilor Porter?
I would so move that we send our protocols out to a lawyer and have a lawyer give us a risk assessment of both options.
And I receive the motion. Do I have a seconder for that motion? I'm seeing no hands. Sorry, the motion does not hit the floor. And there is no seconder. Council, what do you wish to do with the recommendation before us? I'll go to Councillor Townend.
I move to receive the report and adopt the recommendation.
So moved. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Parks, thank you. Mover comment? Seconder comment? No? Anyone else wish to make comment? I'll come back to Councillor Porter.
Yeah, I'm going to make this statement. I don't believe we've done our due diligence. I don't believe we have all the information. And I think it would be prudent for us to ensure that we do have all the information when making decisions that affect people's lives, not only affect people's lives, but affect the financial risks to the municipality and our taxpayers. And I'd like a recorded vote on the motion, please.
Okay, thank you. Before I turn it to the clerk for the recorded vote, are there any final comments? Seeing none, I'll turn it out. Sorry, the deputy, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just a last minute. I just wanted to make it known that I will be supporting the motion as it stands. From what I've seen, the wording is very standard with a lot of other municipalities, a lot of other organizations. It isn't as stringent and as controversial as what some of them are, but it's also strong enough to be able to show that we're showing due diligence on protecting our not only our staff, but our residents when they interact with our staff, as well as council. So with that, I believe we have, and also as was mentioned, it being written with advice from the health unit and gleaning recommendations from other levels of government and everything too. So I'm comfortable endorsing the recommendation as it stands.
Thank you. Anyone else? Back to mover for final. Go ahead, Councillor Townend.
Yes, I just think I'm satisfied that staff have done their due diligence. I think the Ontario Human Rights Commission's recent comments about vaccination protocols makes it, to me, very clear that the township's policy that's proposed here is well within the legal limits. We have a 91% uptake of this policy already among township staff. I think the absence of a policy would be a betrayal to those of our staff who have done their social duty and getting vaccinated and want a safe workplace to work in. So I think our greater liability, quite frankly, as a township is facing unions that won't be happy with us if we don't have some kind of policy in place. So I'm quite satisfied with what staff have produced.
Thank you. That was final comment. I'll turn it to the clerk for a recorded vote.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Porter?
No.
I'll support it.
Councillor Townend?
Yes.
Councillor Budrick?
Yes.
Councillor Gordon? That was a yes.
I'll support it.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Hagedorn?
Yes.
Councillor Parks?
Yes.
And Mayor Brzee?
Yes.
That's 6-1, Your Worship, so it's carried.
Motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, and we'll move forward. We're on to item 12.1, facility allocation policy. We have the policy before us, and I'm not sure if there, Ms. McFarland. All right, Ms. McFarland, did you have anything to add to or highlight in this report at this time?
Your worship, the only thing that I wanted to add is that we have, out of the committee of the whole, all of the recommendation amendments that were requested have been made, and that the users, all of our users, received the policy in a communication on September 13th. And to date, we have not received any comments regarding the new allocation policy.
Thank you. 'Thank you. Council, do we have any questions for the director at this time?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Council, do we have any questions for the director at this time?
Councillor Townend?
Seeing none, and I'll look for a motion to deal with the recommendation. I'll take Councillor Porter. Thank you.
Move to receive and adopt the recommendations.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll take Councillor Buderick. Thank you. Mover, any comment? No? Seconder, any comment?
No.
Thank you. Any other comments from council? Seeing none. I don't need to go back to the mover. I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand or shout out.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion is carried. And we move forward to item 12.2, the recreation cancellation and refund policy. And again, the director is here. Do you have anything to add or highlight for this report?
Again, Your Worship, the only thing is that the requested changes and recommendations from the committee of the whole have been made to the policy.
Thank you. Council, do we have any questions for the director? I'm seeing none. Can I get a mover for this, please? I'll take the deputy mayor as mover. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gordon, thank you. Any comments from the mover or seconder? No? Anyone else? Seeing none. I will say thank you to the director and her team for the work with all of the various organizations to get this to the place it is now. Appreciate it. I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand or yell out.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion is carried. And we move to item 12.3, the transition of the Blue Box program to full producer responsibility. We have a report for information before us, and we have the director to speak to it if she wishes.
Through Your Worship, I'd just like to point out that in the our transition date is July 2025, which was what the update was. We did have a requirement to file a report by September 2021. We have done that. We did it in August, and our next reporting timeframe is in 2023.
Thank you. Council, do we have any questions with regard to this transition or the report before us? I'm seeing no hands. I have a recommendation to receive for information. Someone like to make that motion? Councillor Townend, so moved. Councillor Parks, seconding. Thank you. Do I have any comments from anyone? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand or say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, we move to item 13.1, meeting schedules and office closures for 2022. We have a report from the clerk. Okay. Madam Clerk, do you have anything to add to or highlight in this report?
I don't think too much, Your Worship, other than 2022 will be a municipal election year, so we have incorporated and the change in that to the first the inaugural meeting of council, which in our existing procedure bylaw is set for the first meeting in December. That is moving to November 15th is the first date that council can sit. So in this report, it is showing November 15th as the inaugural. That can change depending on council's wish as we move through it, but that's just a suggestion at this point.
Thank you. Council, do you have any questions with regard to the report before us? Councillor Porter, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, number 3 and 4, you've got the second council meeting in July 25th. Vacation schedule will be canceled. And then the second council meeting in August 20, be canceled. Could we not move that up to the first council meeting so it's back to back? Like July 25th and then August, I don't have a calendar in front of me, but.
The August the 12th? No, 14th, 16th. I don't know. To the clerk.
Yeah, through your worship, we did do that in, I believe it was 2019, and it led to, because of the space between the first meeting in July and the last meeting in August, it did lend for an additional meeting to be called, or a special meeting to be called, to deal with some planning matters. So in 2020, the dates were changed to the last second meeting in both July and August, and it seemed to work better, but it's at the wish of council of what the dates are.
I think that's always an option, to call a special meeting if there's something of time is of the essence that needs to be looked at. But I mean, in previous years, and Jim, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but years ago, I remember on my first and second term of council, they did take quite a break in the summer, and might not have been my second, but the first term, where they'd have, and they would call a special meeting if needed at that time. But just my 2 cents worth, I think that putting the back-to-back just gives everybody a little more opportunity for scheduling if they're going away.
Thank you. Other comments with regard to the proposed schedule? Anyone? No? Oh, Deputy, go ahead.
Just a confirmation question to start. In between the July and the August, there's strong potential for a committee of adjustment meeting in there, or potentially a committee of the whole, which would still interrupt if we went back-to-back meetings. Okay.
Yes, sorry, through your worship, the Committee of Adjustment and Committee of the Whole is scheduled for the first Monday of the month. So there is the potential for that meeting to still be carrying on.
Okay. And if I may, your worship, just to respond to Councillor Porter, I believe she's corrected. The first term of council, it was that way, where they were back-to-back meetings. And it worked okay, with the exception, what I found is when we did come back in September, there was if you didn't have a meeting in between, there was very, very heavy agendas because everybody was playing catch up then once we were back to work. So you just kind of have to weigh out which one you like. Just a comment.
Thank you. And I will add that I know that I'll say my popularity amongst the members of council dwindles a little bit when I call a special meeting of council sometimes. But yes, as Councillor Porter points out, that is always an option if there is something necessary and timely. And I have called meetings outside of that regular schedule. Okay. Other comments? I'm seeing no further comment. I'll look for a motion to accept or modify the recommendations before us. Go to Councillor Porter.
Yeah, I'll move to receive the report and just modify number 3 and 4 as discussed, so we can see how it works. And if there's special meeting called, there's a special meeting called, or if their workload after that is heavy, we can just reevaluate at that time.
Thank you. Just for clarity, the intent would be to, instead of canceling the second meeting in July, it would be to, the second meeting in August, it would be to cancel the first meeting in August and implement the second meeting in August, therefore providing a larger break between the first meeting of July and the second meeting of August. That's the clarity? Okay, does the clerk have that clarity?
Yeah, so we'd just be amending item 4, which would be, well, I don't have the date right in front of me, but that it would be the second Monday of August would be canceled and the August 22nd would remain.
I think that's the intention, yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we have that motion and it is clear. Do I have a seconder for that motion? I'll go to Councillor Gordon. You're seconding? Thank you. Move or comment?
No, I mean, I think it's 6 of one, as the deputy mayor said, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, right? And we tried it the other way last year, so we'll try something different this year and keep reevaluating on a year-to-year basis, I guess.
Thank you. Second or comment? No? Anyone else have comment? I'm seeing no further comments. I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed? Oh, sorry, or yell out. Oh, we seem to have lost Councillor Buderick again. Okay. We still have quorum, so we will continue, and that motion is carried. Thank you. We move forward to item 14.1, an Affordable Housing Partnership Program. We have, I believe, Director Merritt coming in. There she is. Director Merritt, do you have anything to add or highlight in this report at this time?
Through you, Your Worship, there is nothing to highlight, except I didn't want council to have the impression that we have to submit a property. The correspondence from the county said if we are interested in participating in a partnership with them, we could select one of these options.
And thank you for that clarity. Council, do we have any questions with regard to the report before us? Anyone? I'm seeing no questions. Do we have a motion? And I note that within the recommendation, there are several ors. I'll go to Councillor Porter.
I'll move to receive the report and adopt recommendation 1 and 5. Oh, sorry, recommendation 1. And if I could speak to why.
And so your motion is to simply approving recommendation 1. Okay, do I have a seconder for that? I'll go to Councillor Parks. Thank you. You're the seconder. Councillor Porter, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that, there's no harm in submitting all 3 properties and see which one, kind of throw something on the wall and see which sticks, sort of philosophy. But if we submit all 3 and then they come back with one of them that they like, and I think we should make the decision at that time to transfer it, not make it a blanket decision at this time to decide to transfer the property.
Okay, thank you. Seconder, did you have a comment?
Yes, through your worship, I just wanted to comment on what Councillor Porter said. Yes, I think that's the best option that we have available to us. And I think there's such a need to keep seniors in our communities that we should be looking at some more affordable housing options that are available.
Thank you very much. Other comments with regard to the motion at hand? I'll go to the deputy.
Start with a question to the director. I don't remember reading in the report, but is there a time frame if we follow this process and make the decision afterwards whether we actually want to carry through or not? Are there time implications with the county that they wouldn't be able to adhere to for the funding?
Through you, Your Worship, for the funding, that's a really good question. We may need to bring some details later on about the funding per se. They did request that we give them an answer by the end of October, and that we should be, zoning wise, we should be able to move forward by the end of December and potentially extending, but they haven't said any. I don't remember reading either in their correspondence whether there was anything about funding.
Okay.
But I will ask that question and bring clarification later this week.
If I may, as a member of the PLAS committee from the county side, I believe I'm remembering this correctly, that the decision of PLAS to move forward with their selected property must take place prior to December 31st of this year. They must have shovel and ground in the spring and be completed by December 31st of next year. I believe that's the timelines the county is facing for this project. Deputy, go ahead.
If I may continue. I'm not going to support the motion the way it stands, just because, especially the one property in Amherstview, it is a park. And I think we really need to take a close look whether we want to take green space, existing green space for housing. So I'm not going to support it for that.
Okay, thank you. Other comments? I'll go to Councillor Parks.
I just wanted to comment on what the deputy was mentioning. The problem is if we don't accept the first option, then the option for Bath is not available because it's only Odessa and Amherstview that are identified in options 2 to 4.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Porter.
And I agree that Deputy Mayor makes a good point about the green space, but that's why I took out the supporting the transfer of the property. If they were to pick that one, then we could have that full discussion about whether we want to proceed with that one. And also to Councillor Parks' remarks, we need to include the Bath property as well in one of the options.
Okay. Other comment? I'm seeing no other comments. Right. The motion is to receive the report and adopt recommendation 1 only. Right. I will call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand or yell out. 1, 2, 3. Those opposed? And motion is lost. And is there another motion? I'll go to the deputy.
Move to receive and adopt recommendation 3 and 5.
Recommendation 3 and 5. Okay, so moved. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Townend, you're seconding. All right. Move or comment?
Yeah. I'm putting 3 out there simply because I've already made the statement about the green space, and in the report they were saying that there was a potential for complications with the site that was chosen in Bath. So in order to get this, to keep us in the running for the housing, it looked like the property in Odessa was the cleanest and quickest potential property we had, and it would require some green space in the Odessa one as well to be merged. In the report it mentioned that, but it's not green space that's actually used for a park. It's more of a 4-wheeler trail. So of all the options, I chose that one.
Thank you. Seconder comment? Councillor Townend? No? Okay. Other comments, please. Councillor Porter, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not going to support that option. I mean, I would have, looked at any option that the county chose, but that one in particular, I don't think we should tie our hands. That one in particular, it is near the 401. It is going to we're going to have to take green space away from the community of Odessa. And as well, it's not likely to be on a bus route anytime soon. So for all those reasons, I mean, I would consider it if we were to give the county all the options and that's the one that they wanted, then I would consider it, give it full consideration. But I think for those very reasons and agreeing to sell it automatically without having a full and proper discussion about the drawbacks of that site, I just can't support the motion.
Councillor Parks?
I also won't be supporting the motion. Couple of reasons. Again, the green space is a concern. I agree with Councillor Porter, at least if it comes back to council. Once county has had a chance to look at it, then we can make the determination as to whether or not we want to do it. There's also a concern with the Odessa site with a record of the site condition that because it used to be the water treatment plant. And it also excludes Bath because there is a growing aging population in the village of Bath that people want to see in the community, but they don't have options available to them. So.
Thank you. Other comments? Anyone else? No. I will add, actually, I'm going to voice a question at this point to the director with regard to that fifth clause in the recommendation that council support the transfer of ownership of that property for $1. Is that a support in principle and that would be a required approval at a later date? Or is that a support as in it would be confirmed that council is selling any one of those properties for $1?
So through you, your worship, so the county has requested that clause. So they gave us like 3 or 4 items to follow when we submit which property, if we're interested in submitting. And they did say that it should come with a resolution from council that supports the transfer of ownership for $1. And we have to submit that by October 31st. Now, I mean, if the decision is to do different, we can submit what we have and they can make their decision whether this is what they want to do or not.
Thank you. And just to speak my piece on this, my concern with the original motion was actually the failure to support that final clause. I believe the county is looking for that statement not as a final approval, but as we're not trying to sell it for market value, we're trying to transfer it at a nominal cost. So that's why I believe that recommendation has to be part of this. I prefer it to be part of this. It will have my support. Okay. Other comments? The motion on the floor is for clause 3 and 5. Okay. I'll call the question, unless there's further. No, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. And those opposed? Motion is carried. Okay. We move forward to item 14.2, Lakeside Pond Subdivision Phase 2, Stage 1. We have the report before us and we have the director here with us to answer any questions or highlight anything that she believes needs to be highlighted. The director, do you have anything to add at this time?
Through your worship, no, there is nothing to add at this time.
Thank you. Council, do we have any questions with regards to this report? I'm seeing none. I'll look for a motion. Councillor Townend, so moved. Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Deputy, thank you. And mover comment? Seconder comment? Anyone else have comment on this report or this recommendation? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed? Motion is carried. 14.3. R131311354 Ontario Inc., et cetera. We had the report and the recommendation before us with regard to Lakeside Gardens, and we have the director here to highlight anything that needs to be highlighted.
There's no highlights for this report, your worship.
Thank you. Council, what would you like to do with this report and the multitude of recommendations? 5, I guess, with A's and B's. Do I have a mover? Deputy, you're so moved. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Townend. Thank you. Okay. Council, do you have any comments from the mover? From the seconder? Anyone else? I'm seeing none. I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed? Motion is carried. We move to Number 16, communication for consideration. And we have the MAD message yearbook advertising information. Request for funding, basically. Council, what would you like to do with this request? Deputy, go ahead.
Move to receive the request and continue support with the business card ad.
I'll take that as a motion. Do I have a seconder? Anyone? Councillor Townend. And mover comment? No, seconder comment? Anyone else have comment? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Notices of motion or direct motion. Do we have anything from council this evening? Councillor Townend, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to give notice of motion, and I would move to request staff to bring a report to council on the progress of negotiations for an agreement between Loyalist Township and the Limestone School Board in respect to the use of the Amherst Island Public School facilities.
Thank you. That is a notice of motion, and I don't believe there's any need to make it timely and in order. So, and I'll accept that as a notice of motion. Is there any other notice of motions for this evening? Seeing none, we can move forward to the consent agenda. For the purpose of convenience and for expediting meetings, matters of business that are repetitive or routine in nature are included in the consent agenda, and all such matters of business contained in the consent agenda are voted on collectively. A particular matter of business may be singled out from the consent agenda for debate or separate vote upon the request of any member of council. In the case of a separate vote, the excluded matter of business is severed from the consent agenda. Each and every matter of business contained in the consent agenda is recorded separately in the minutes of the meeting. Is there anything that anyone wishes to separate from the consent agenda this evening? I'll go to Councillor Porter. Go ahead.
22.1.
Sorry, say again. I didn't hear.
Item 22.1.
22.1. Thank you. Anything else? Anyone? If there's nothing else to separate, I will ask for a motion regarding the consent agenda. Councillor Porter, so moved. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gordon, thank you. And any comments on the rest of the consent agenda? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed? Motion is carried. We'll go to 22.1. And Municipality of Trent Lakes. Councillor Porter, go ahead.
There's 22. What did you say? I'm sorry.
The Municipality of Trent Lakes, OHIP eye care.
No, 22.1.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm reading the wrong one. That's 21.1. 22.1 is the Anishinaabe Nation proof of identification for vaccine passports and COVAX memo. My apologies.
That's okay. Move to receive and support.
Motion to receive and support. Do I have a seconder for that? I'll call again. Do I have it? Councillor Gordon, you're seconding? Yes. Councillor Porter, would you like to make comment?
I just think it's important that we support the this resolution from the Grand Council.
Thank you. Seconder comment? Anyone else have comment? Deputy, go ahead.
I'm just not sure if I missed something in this. I don't find where they're looking for support. It was more of just an information, I thought. Because at the end, it says we trust this information will be shared widely to avoid any confusion or disruption to our processes. So I'm not sure what we're supporting.
Councillor Porter, do you have an intent?
Yeah, just to support their request and their information. I know it's not usually it's in the form of a resolution, but it is. It has been circulated to us, And I just want to receive it and support it.
Effectively as a statement of support. And does that provide you the clarity, Deputy? And any other comment? Back to mover. Do you want final?
No.
I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. We move forward to members' privilege 24. Is there anything under members' privilege this evening from any member of council? Councillor Townend.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to congratulate the Amherst Island Agricultural Society on a very successful event, which took place this past Sunday. It was the first of its kind and hopefully the first of many more. Unfortunately, it was restricted and limited in number for attendees due, of course, to COVID, but a great first event and a reinvigoration of the agricultural aspect of the island, which is so treasured and so important.
Thank you very much. Anyone else have anything under members' privilege? I'm seeing none. Move to item 25, upcoming meeting dates. We are scheduled to have the Committee of Adjustment on October the 4th, along with the Committee of the Whole, and October the 12th, regular council, and October the 25th, the regular council. Is anyone, I'll go to the clerk.
Through your worship, I just wanted to let council know that a date has been set for the renewable energy, the information session. So we're looking at Tuesday, October the 26th, which will allow us to send out information cards regarding the public information session. And I believe as well on the card will have information on the budget as well, just because they kind of go hand in hand. So there won't be any presentation for budget on that meeting, but it's just that, again, just it with us sending it out via mail, it's just allowing us to do some more external communication.
Okay. And just for clarity, that public meeting for the vibrancy committees and such like will be done by virtual means. It'll be Zoom, correct?
Yes, yes, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Anything else under upcoming meeting dates that we need to focus on? Seeing none, I look for a motion for the confirmatory bylaw. Councillor Porter, so moved. Councillor Townend seconds. Okay. I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed? Motion is carried. And finally, a motion to adjourn. Who wants to make that motion? Councillor Townend, so moved. Deputy Mayor seconds. Right. Call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed? Motion is carried. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great evening.